Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episode 9 of Apple TV's Ted Lasso, entitled La Locker Room au Folles. Now, bear with me, I don't know French. I've been searching, like Googling the pronunciations and whatnot, so I don't mess them up. I believe that au Folles is pretty much the closest that I'm going to get with my non-French speaking Detroit accent, but the title translates literally to the crazy locker room, which, given the nature of what the locker room experience in this episode is enough, I think, to explain the episode title. But we can also dig a little bit deeper. The title here is also a reference to the Broadway musical La Cage aux Folles, which was about a gay couple, and it was the first hit Broadway musical that was centered around a gay couple. I've never seen it, but I'd imagine there are probably also some thematic parallels between this episode and that play, maybe even direct lines taken from it. I'll save it for those of you who have seen the play to inform me if there are some more direct correlations between the two, but if there's anything further than that, I don't know it. I haven't seen it. But as for the episode, so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the way I feel about it. I watched it last night. I kind of like, I did my notes. I walked away from it. It was pretty late. I had about maybe like 15 minutes left of an episode of Dead Ringer to watch. I watched that. Then I went to bed, and I kind of just sat with it, I guess, overnight. And I woke up again this morning. I started thinking about it some more, and I find myself at a place, at least I found myself at a place where I'd say that I'm conflicted, because this feels like an episode that I would normally love. I just didn't. It's not an episode that I loved. It's not an episode that I even liked. So I'm gonna get into why I didn't like this episode, and also through that I'm gonna talk about why I thought I would like it and why I didn't. So obviously, the arc surrounding Colin's sexuality and how it will play out, it was of great importance to me. I've been talking about it for weeks. You guys know that. Now that we've reached the resolution of that arc, I'm torn between two feelings. One is the feeling of knowing we can never have too many stories promoting the acceptance of others. That's something that this show has really hung its head on. And particularly the acceptance of minorities, who are probably feeling the world's boot on their neck right now. When I say minorities, I don't mean like black people like myself. I mean anybody who's not a straight white man. You're pretty much there. As far as people who have my full support and sympathy and empathy. But at the same time, the other feeling I can't shake is the clumsy and insulting way in which this lesson was laid out for me, and the pretty obvious manipulations of our emotions that took place to get us here. Now, I can't say it feels like pandering. I feel like I would leave that to gay people to say if they feel pandered to. But what I can say is that Colin's arc lacked any grace or subtlety or nuance. And I personally feel it was an insult to the intelligence of Ted Lasso fans. And I know a lot of you are probably like, a lot of you are probably just like, oh, I just saw a beautiful, heartwarming moment about gay acceptance. Give me a minute. Just give me a minute. So the show very obviously, I think, was working for the big heartfelt moment that would resonate with good people in our current political climate. And people who watch Ted Lasso, I think, are generally good people. Myself, you guys, we watch it because we can appreciate seeing people be kind to one another in this political climate, in this world, in the age that we're living in right now. They just didn't give a single solitary fuck how obvious they were about getting us there, and that made me feel pandered to as an audience member. Like, watching them move toward the moment where Isaac and Colin finally talk in Colin's doorway, watching them move toward that moment was flat out insulting to me. Like, they really think I'm a fucking numbskull right now. And you might be thinking like, whoa, Mike, that's kind of harsh to say that they thought you're a fucking numbskull. But let me ask you this. When we very first learned that Colin was gay, did you guys think anyone on the team was going to have a problem with it? Right? So I'm going to do something I've never done in the history of this channel, a flashback. Here's a clip from my video for season 3, episode 3 of this season, talking about Colin and Isaac. But then you have the bigger picture of Colin keeping his sexuality a secret from his teammates. Like, given the nature of the show, you would think that that's not gonna matter. Like, even with Isaac's comment, like, oh, it's a big gay bruv. Like, I feel like if he knew Colin was gay, he wouldn't feel any kind of way about it. He just wouldn't have made that comment. Like, I'm not gonna say something like that about, Colin's my guy. He's right here. Like, so I don't even think that it would matter to the teammates that Colin's gay, but they introduced this plot line for a reason, and I'm really curious to see what they're gonna do with it. And now, here we are in episode 9, arriving at that place we should have arrived at 6 weeks ago, because the show wanted to act like no one was going to arrive at the same place that I did after episode 3, but I'd be willing to bet every single one of you watching right now had the same thought that I had, right, that you just saw me say in episode 3, 6 fucking weeks ago. I guarantee every single one of you felt the same way. So I'm not patting myself on the back here. This isn't a flex. Like, look, I was right. I bet all of you felt the same way, and now we've had to wait 6 fucking weeks to watch this show clumsily land at the very obvious landing point. And ironically, we all of us, we didn't buy that the team might have an issue with Colin's sexuality because of how well written the show used to be. Like, we know these characters too well. Would you have not been calling for the writers' heads if Isaac had a problem with Colin's sexuality? You would, because that's not who this show has told us that Isaac is. Instead, the show chose to ignore the groundwork it had already laid regarding telling us who these people are, because they wanted to get, oh, that makes me feel so warm and cuddly inside. They wanted to get that reaction out of us so badly that they wrote that arc as if we didn't know who the fuck these people were. And I'm sitting here this whole time like, man, I hope this incredibly kind, no, they're acting like I'm sitting here like, I hope these incredibly kind and thoughtful and loving people who I've been watching for 2.5 seasons don't hate their friend because he's gay. Like, no one watching the show thought that. Like, no one thought that was a possibility. Yet and still, we had to sit through this entire fucking episode of Isaac treating Colin like shit because the writers think we're so goddamn stupid that we're watching the episode going, well, maybe Isaac does have a problem with the sexuality. He won't even touch Colin's hand. And then we're supposed to be shocked when they have their moment in Colin's doorway. Oh my God, Isaac was just upset because Colin didn't tell him this whole time. Like, we're some fucking idiots. Let me ask you guys another question. If you had a close friend that you found out was gay and you were upset that they chose to keep it from you, their best friend, would you have treated that person the way Isaac treated Colin this episode? Of course you fucking wouldn't, because no human acts like that to someone they care about because they're upset about about not being good enough for their friend. Like, oh my God, I'm so upset that my friend wasn't comfortable enough with me to tell me they're gay, so I'm gonna react by treating them like shit. No one does that. But this show thought that we were stupid enough to buy that and then sit here and think like, oh man, maybe Isaac doesn't like that he's gay. Like, come the fuck on, man. So unfortunately, by the time we actually got to the doorway conversation, all of this had already been resolved for me. Like, Colin had already told the team. I knew Isaac was okay with him being gay the whole time, obviously. I've known for 6 weeks that Isaac was okay with it. But within the context of this episode, Isaac had already had a conversation with Roy and Will, giving some surprisingly good insight. And as far as I'm concerned, it was settled before we even got to the doorway scene. So when we finally got the Colin and Isaac conversation that I've been waiting for all this time, we just got it 6 episodes too fucking late because the writers wanted to treat us like idiots for a few weeks first. So yeah, that's why I'm conflicted on this episode. And in a greater sense, I think conflicted on this season. But if we're being perfectly honest, I'm no longer conflicted on this season. It's bad. Period. I'm not hedging on that anymore. Like, I don't know. No, this is a bad season. It's a bad season of a comedy show, and it's a bad season for Ted Lasso. Like, there isn't much that can happen in the final 3 episodes to change the story of this show. And when I say the story, I mean like the story of like how in the future, historically, this show is going to be looked at. Like how we look at, like when we look at Dexter, we think, man, had a good first 4 seasons, then it started to get bad, and then it really stunk at the end. You have people who are upset with the Lost finale. You have people who are upset with the Sopranos finale. We look back on Breaking Bad and The Wire as shows that ultimately nailed it. I think ultimately what we're going to look, when I talk about Ted Lasso's story, that's what I'm talking about, how we're going to look at it. I think the story ultimately will be that Ted Lasso was a great show that came along at the perfect time when we, as a country and as a planet, needed it the most, and that it just totally shit the fucking bed in the final season. And I think it's best that we all come to grips with that now, and I feel like I've laid out a pretty compelling case as to why that's how we should be feeling right now. But if you're not convinced yet that this is a bad season, despite the case I've laid out for Colin's story arc, don't worry, I've got more. I'll start by kindly referring you to that stupid fucking heart bent song that Ted does in this episode that ends up just being a musical fart joke. And that was probably the worst gag of the season, if not the whole show. And I couldn't believe in that moment that this show has been reduced to fart jokes. But here we are. Ted's making fucking fart jokes, rhyming heart bent with fart scent. Congratulations, Ted Lasso writers. You're 8 fucking years old. What the fuck was that sorry shit? Anyway, I'd also like to refer you to the handling of Nate's character arc. I'm not even going to talk about whatever they're doing with him now that appears to be this lazy-ass redemption arc in which he's redeemed because he found a girlfriend and has brief moments of guilt over how shitty he's been but has done nothing to reconcile with the people he's been shitty toward. Like, yeah, sure. Like, that's Nate's redemption arc, sure. And yes, they'll probably have a scene where him and Ted kind of like hash it out in these final 3, whatever. But like, they've wasted my time with Nate this whole season. But no, we can just talk about this episode and all the time we wasted with this whole Rupert thing to ultimately arrive at a place of Nate's choosing to be with his girl instead of trolling for pussy with Rupert. Like, okay, wow, really? You expected me to believe the same guy who took all this time to even work up to the point of asking Jade out on a date where he couldn't even do it without spitting on something first, was gonna consider going out on a pussy-getting adventure with Rupert. That's what you wanted me to believe was a possibility of happening, and I'm supposed to be like, oh, Nate wanted to spend time with his girlfriend instead of trolling for pussy with Rupert. As if trolling for pussy with Rupert was ever a possibility for the Nate Shelley character. Nate Shelby. I'm gonna call him Nate Shelby just because I'm pissed off that they wanted me to think that was gonna be a possibility, so that I would then be moved that he chose to spend time with his girlfriend. Of course Nate chose to spend time with his girlfriend. What the fuck? Like, what character have you been showing me these 2 years? And this whole time, it kind of felt like they were working toward maybe Rupert was going to make a move on Jade. Because, like, they've talked this whole time about how Rupert likes to upgrade by downgrading in age. Like, he finds somebody new. But I guess, what's his current girl? Bex, whatever. She's still young, so I guess he doesn't need to upgrade to a younger model yet. But I couldn't even wrap my head around Rupert's motivations in this episode. Like, I have an idea. Like, he saw Nate was ready to settle down, and he probably decided that's not a good move for his coach because he's their organization, a pussy getting. So his coach is like, I mean, Rupert's like, I need my coach to be out here getting laid with me. Maybe that's what Rupert was up to. Who knows? Because the handling of Nate's arc is going to be another massive flaw that we're going to talk about when we look back on this show. So there's not a ton left to talk about, but this is a good place to transition to the good stuff. Higgins was great in this episode, and that's it. That's the good. When Keely asked them to say what they didn't like about Jack, I love when Higgins was like, her handshake is just too firm. Like, I get it, you're friendly. Higgins, man, Higgins is a criminally undervalued character on this show. Like, I don't think he's underrated necessarily. Like, I think people who are fans of Higgins like understand how great the Higgins character is. I just think like if you ask people about Ted Lasso, they're going to talk about Ted, they're going to talk about Roy, they're going to talk about Jamie, they're going to talk about Keely, they're going to talk about Rebecca, they're going to talk about Danny even, they're going to talk about Sam. You're going to run off 7, 8, 9 names before you mention Higgins, but Higgins always comes through with like a really slick, funny ass line. And then like, I think the line of the season, if not the line of the entire series, happens in this episode from Higgins. I don't know if I've ever laughed this hard watching this show. And obviously, we've all laughed a lot watching this show. I don't know if I'll laugh this hard, but it's when Higgins tells the team that the fan who said the F word has been removed. And he's like, and I apologize for my father. Like, what? Like, one, that was a hilarious joke. But, like, why would you make it at that time, dog? Like, man, they're having like a serious conversation about the acceptance of gay people and the use of the F word. He's just like, yeah, sorry my dad called you guys the F word. Like, dog, like, man, like that's a joke that I would make in general, but like not at that time. Like, dog, that shit was so fucking funny, man. Oh, man, but actually, that even reminds me of one other thing I wanted to mention that I'm not sure how I feel about, but I'd be interested in knowing the logic. I'd be interested in knowing the reason behind why they didn't have the fan actually say the word. I've never seen a show or film that kind of like self-censor in that way. Like, art has always wanted to portray, I think, the artist version of reality. But this isn't Disney, it's Apple. Like, I'm sure they wouldn't hesitate to have a character say any other word if it fit within the context of the show as something that character would say. So I'm curious as to why they didn't show the fans saying it. Like, my guess is that they felt they didn't need to force someone like a gay person who might be watching the show to hear the word. They're like, okay, we can relay the message and the feeling and the pain associated with it without actually subjecting someone to hearing it. And I get that. Like, and if that's what they were going for, they pulled it off. Like, I didn't need to hear it. Like, I would have gained nothing from hearing the word. It's not like the impact of it was lessened because I didn't hear it. Not the case. Like, the impact was not lessened. It worked without the word. My thing is, that's not a consideration that's afforded to other groups of people. So why this word on this show at this time, right now? Like, I'm just curious, why is this the moment where a show decided we're not gonna make people have to hear this word? Again, assuming that's why they didn't have them say it. We don't want people to have to hear that word. I'm just curious why that decision was made at this time when I feel like if a fan said the N-word to Sam, they might have let him say it. That's all I'm saying. They might have let him say the shit. I'm just kidding. I probably think they probably wouldn't have had the character say it. It just doesn't feel... I think the reality is that this isn't the kind of show that they want to have characters saying racial slurs. I get it. It's not that kind of show. I'm like halfway fucking around, but like I do think it is interesting that they did choose to not have the word be said. Not because of anything regarding the show specifically, just because I've never heard that before. Like, if a show has the ability to say the word, they say the word. So I'm curious to why they didn't say the word. Or maybe they did. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they would have been the show. Like, we're going to have the character say it. I'm sure it was a conversation that was had in the writer's room. Like, maybe not in the writer's room. I'm pretty sure the writer probably wrote the word. But, like, a conversation like, okay, do we want to have the character say this, or maybe they had the character say it and they were like, okay, do we want to cut it out or not? Like, I'm sure the conversation happened. I'm just, I don't know. I kind of wish I hope I can hear someone talk about how they arrived at that decision. And I'm also curious as to why they didn't show Colin coming out to the team as well. I could come up with reasons like I did for why they didn't have the fans say the word. But if I'm being honest, this one just kind of feels like they didn't want to write a coming out speech. Like, I feel like they could have just had like cut it off a second later. Have Colin say, Isaac isn't gay, I am. And then we don't have to hear everything that follows, like the whole explanation, like I didn't want to tell you guys, because like we don't have to hear the actual coming out conversation. Like, just the Isaac is a gay I am would have been enough, but I thought it was an interesting decision to not even give us the I am, like to just cut it off there. I'm curious about that too, and I don't have an answer for that. Like, I haven't, like I gave some theories as to why they didn't have the person say the word. I'm certain that they probably had a number of conversations about whether or not they wanted to write it, say it, air it, whatever. I don't really have a guess for why they cut Colin off before he admitted to the team that he was gay, but I don't know. Yeah, just curious about the thought process. So, as always, we're going to close with a couple thoughts, one long, one short. The long one is that Rory's speech at the press conference, it was a good speech, but by that point in the episode, I was already, like, fully fed up with entertaining the Colin is gay, does the team care storyline. So his whole story about why Isaac did what he did, it didn't really land with me. Like, it landed as another attempt at a big Ted Lasso heartfelt moment swing, but I don't even agree with Roy's conclusion. Like, I like the when I started the video, I said I'm going to talk about the stuff I didn't like and the decisions they made and how they got there. And I think this is a good example because this is one where I kind of feel like I could see like the process of kind of what they were going for and why it didn't work. Like, I like that he said he was going to give Isaac love. Like, I appreciate that. Like, there's a guy going through some pain, clearly. I'm going to give him love rather than chastise him. But I don't think he can say it's none of his business why Isaac did what he did. Like, it absolutely is your business why your player ran into the stands and started manhandling fans. It is absolutely your business. Like, if Isaac randomly started beating on his teammates, would we all not agree? It is the coach's business to know why why one player is beating on another. Makes sense, right? He's the coach. He has the right to know why a player would behave that way. So now if the player extends that outside of the pitch and into the stands, taking it, into like people who didn't sign up to be involved in the actual gameplay, yeah, you got the right to ask questions. If it's okay to ask the questions when they're on the pitch, why would it not be okay to ask the questions while you beating the shit out of the fans? Like, but the show, here's what they did wrong. The show, at least for me, like I'm sure a lot of people bought it, but here's why it didn't work for me. The show wanted to tie the "it's none of my fucking business" line to the homosexuality theme to look extra super woke, but like wanting to know why Isaac would attack fans has nothing to do with Colin's sexuality. But they tried to make it that way by lazily tying the attack on the fan to Colin's sexuality via Isaac's frustration with Colin not telling him. So when when Roy says it's none of my fucking business about why Isaac attacked the fan, we're meant to connect that feeling with Colin's sexuality. But my brain isn't as lazy as the writers think it is. Isaac doesn't get to attack fans without question because Colin is gay. Like, the two things don't, like, you're missing a connecting piece, and the connecting piece is not Colin's frustration Isaac's frustration with Colin not telling him. That doesn't track. Like that you don't get to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Roy doesn't get to ask why Isaac would, no, I'm sorry. It's none of Roy's business why Isaac attacked fans because Isaac is mad that Colin didn't tell him he was gay. Nope, that doesn't work. You tried it, it doesn't work. Now, if they wanted to make Isaac's behavior more personal and tied to Isaac specifically, they could have done a little bit more to maybe make me think that maybe Isaac has a family member who was gay and was scared to come out, and that became an issue. And that's why Isaac is so upset about Colin not coming out to him. Like, I had a family member who was gay, who like say, oh, a brother who is gay, and I thought he didn't come out to me. I thought he would have been comfortable enough to do that. He didn't come out to me, and then now he ended up taking that secret to the grave. He maybe he killed himself or something. So now I have a hang up over people not feeling comfortable with telling me about opening up about who they are. They could have done that. And then now, when you have Roy saying it's none of my fucking business why he did that, it works more. Because now we know, like, Isaac is dealing with something. Like Colin not telling Isaac triggered something personal in Isaac that made him react that way. They kind of tried to do that, but they didn't do a good enough job of it. So now the Roy speech didn't really connect. And I think that's where they fucked up. Oh boy. Yeah, so I think that's where they messed up. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. And my last thought is it's simple. My favorite scene from the trailers in this episode. It's when Ted says Roy said y'all did a good job, and Beard goes, oh, that like faints. I love that scene in the trailer. It still made me laugh in this episode. So that's all I got for episode 9. I feel like I probably pissed off a lot of you guys, but here's what I would challenge you to do. If you don't agree with me and you thought this episode was wonderful, you thought it was powerful, it worked for you, it moved you, don't be in the comments like, you don't know what you're talking about, or like, whatever the fuck. Like, address the points I made, because I said it didn't work, and then I gave something that, like, if you made a transcript, you could bullet point all the reasons that I gave for why I felt like what they went for didn't work. So if you don't agree, and this episode worked for you, and you loved it, and it really landed, and it tugged at your heartstrings, tell me why my points were wrong. Don't tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. Be like, okay, you said this. That's not what they were going for. This is what they were going for. You said this. That's not why it worked for me. It worked for me because of this. Like, attack my points, or challenge my points, or refute my points. Don't just be like, I don't agree. Okay, spare me that. But if you don't agree, I'd be very interested to hear why you don't agree with me and why you thought this episode worked, because I would challenge anybody as far as my my support in the LGBTQ community. It's very well fucking documented. So like, my support of any downtrodden people is very well fucking documented. So for me to watch this episode and come away from it like you went for something that was that felt like pandering to me, and you didn't really I can't say you didn't work toward what you were going for. You just worked towards something different. Like, what you ended up with, you didn't work toward that. Like the work you put was to something different. And I that's what I'm going for in my opinion of this episode. So like, hey, if you don't feel me, attack my points, or don't attack my points, because you don't want to get into an attack competition with me. I'll fuck you up. Challenge my points analytically and intelligently, and we could chop it up. All good. Anytime any of you guys watching who have ever disagreed with me respectfully, it's always been all love. You know that. So if you don't agree, it's all love if you come at me respectfully. And I will see you guys next week for episode 10. And until then, peace.